One evening she stood before the dryer, trembling. She held her late husband's sweater in her hands. The fabric still carried his scent, the warm fragrance of lavender and cedarwood that brought tears to her eyes. She closed her eyes for a moment, memories flooding back, the embrace of his arms, the sound of his laughter, the comfort he provided. She hesitated. But the machine, it called to her. She placed the sweater into the dryer. The machine screamed. It was a sound unlike anything she had ever heard, an animalistic shriek that tore through the walls. The lights flickered, the kitchen warped, and Mrs. Gable collapsed to the floor, clutching her ears in agony. The dryer spun faster and faster, its drum a blur of motion. The world around her twisted, and then everything went still. The next morning, when the neighbors checked in on Mrs. Gable, the house was eerily silent. The dryer sat in the kitchen, gleaming as though it had never been touched. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of where Mrs. Gable had gone. Only the dryer remained, its door shut tight, the faintest hum still vibrating from within. Beside it lay a single white sock, freshly cleaned but stained with something darker, something no washing could erase. The twist months passed. The house sat vacant for a while, eerie and untouched. It wasn't long before a young couple, Ben and Lisa, discovered the listing. Newlyweds with high hopes of starting a family, they saw the house as a cozy, charming place to lay down roots. It had all the quirks that made it unique, a little worn around the edges but with undeniable character. The dryer left behind in the kitchen appeared almost brand new. It was a luxury appliance, one of those sleek models that promised efficiency and convenience. Ben and Lisa saw it as a blessing. Who didn't want a modern dryer in their new home? Lisa, excited about the prospect of a new beginning, smiled brightly as she loaded the machine with a fresh load of laundry. Ben stood nearby, admiring their new kitchen, but something about the dryer seemed off. It was so pristine, so out of place in the otherwise lived-in home. It was as though it didn't belong. His gaze lingered for a moment too long, and he noticed a small stain near the bottom of the dryer, a streak that looked disturbingly like a handprint. His stomach turned, but he brushed it off as a harmless stain, perhaps a small imperfection from when the previous owners moved out. After all, it was just a dryer. "Everything okay, Ben?" Lisa asked, catching him staring at it. "Huh? Yeah, just thinking," Ben replied with a smile. He didn't want to admit to Lisa the odd feeling gnawing at him. She wouldn't understand. He wasn't one to entertain superstitions or let a stain bother him. That evening they settled into their routine. They enjoyed a quiet dinner and settled in the living room for the night. The house seemed peaceful, a perfect setting for them to start their new life. But then, as the night deepened, something began to stir. The hum. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint vibration in the air. But then it grew louder, an unnerving low drone that seemed to creep up from the floorboards. It resonated through the walls, vibrating everything. The entire room seemed to quiver as though the house itself was alive. Ben furrowed his brow, uneasy. Something wasn't right. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lisa looked at him, her face puzzled. "Hear what?" Before he could answer, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. Lisa finally heard it too. "What on earth is that?" she muttered, standing up and heading toward the kitchen. Ben followed, unease building in his chest. He could see the dryer now, its steel surface almost glowing in the dim kitchen light. It hummed, an eerie mechanical pulse that seemed to echo in the hollow space. Lisa peered through the glass door of the drum. The shadows inside shifted, moving in ways that defied logic, like the reflection of something, someone, pressing against the glass. Her breath caught in her throat. There, pressed against the drum, was the unmistakable face of Mrs. Gable, her features distorted and stretched as though trapped in some kind of horrible scream. Lisa staggered backward, her hands flying to her mouth. The figure inside the dryer was a grotesque mockery of the woman who had lived here before. "Ben!" Lisa screamed. "Ben, look!" But before Ben could make sense of what he was seeing, the dryer clicked open, the door swinging wide without anyone touching it. The hum stopped abruptly, leaving only an eerie silence in its wake. The kitchen was suffused with a cold, unnatural chill, and the air felt heavy with something dark pressing against their skin.